All right, folks, welcome in. It is 12 o'clock, the top of the hour. Excited to have you all joining us today. My name is Kingsley Jackson, and I am a member of the Student Affairs team here at UAGC. And I'll be your TLC host for this panel session, Open Access Impact on Student Population and Expectations. By joining us today, you acknowledge that this session is being recorded and will be shared with TLC-related materials. Microphones will be muted for this presentation, but we encourage you to post your questions and comments in the chat. Also, we have enabled live transcription. If you would like to use it, click the live transcription button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Now, I'm pleased to introduce to you the host of this panel session, Rachel Orlansky, to take us further.
Thank you, Kingsley. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining our panel today. I am Rachel Orlansky, the VP of Student Affairs here at UAGC. For those of you who attended the opening session yesterday morning with Paul Pastrek, I think he did a beautiful job in setting the stage for this panel without knowing it. He talked about what it means to be open access, literally opening our doors to everyone, and wondered aloud to the group, are we doing our best efforts to support the population that we open our doors to, who may not succeed without specific supports and understanding and a top-notch education? So this panel today, made up of one full-time faculty member and my student affairs colleagues, all of whom work at UAGC, which is an open access institution. We're here really to address this question, right? How can we do our best to support our population of students in an open access institution? And by acknowledging the expectations that exist, both visible and invisible, by highlighting the need for collaboration and holistic support, and ultimately what we believe it takes to effectively support and retain our students. So I am going to ask a few questions of our panelists by way of introductions. I'm going to begin with Rob. Dr. Rob Shah has been with this institution for over 15 years and teaches within our School of Forbes School of Business and Technology. Rob, I've heard you speak to the very levels of academic preparedness in an open access institution like our own. If you could kick us off by talking about the impact you experience in our courses and what opportunities exist there for us to best support our students.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Rachel, for that introduction. And it's really an honor and privilege to be part of this panel here today. So thank you for the opportunity. To address your question there, as faculty, we play very important roles in the lives of our students, obviously. And I think I'm going to kind of couple this with our overall philosophy of culture of care as well, because I think these two are really aligned with our topic today in culture of care. We have to also, of course, understand that our students have busy lives. They come from diverse backgrounds. Some of them are first-generation students in their families. And so we've got a unique opportunity as faculty to not only change that student's life for the better with the services that we provide and the support that we provide, but also have a generational impact as well, meaning we affect their entire family and future generations as well. So I just want to keep that at a high level, because to me, that's an kind of an umbrella statement, if you will. It's not only just that one student, but we've got to be cognizant of their entire lives and the other people we impact. So as faculty, we can do that by simply creating a caring and supportive learning environment for our students. This is critically important, especially in an online world where students sometimes could feel isolated or feel alone. And I think our faculty do a tremendous job of that. And I applaud the university for kicking off that culture of care initiative about a year and a half or so ago. And prior to that, it was Power of One. And I think this is truly unique in the education landscape of America in general. And that's what really sets us apart from a university, from potentially what other universities offer. We're truly student focused, but I also look at culture of care as not just student focused, but also organizationally focused. In other words, it's a culture of care across different departments. And so I mean that from a faculty perspective, we often work with other stakeholders internally, such as instructional designers and assessment folks and operations and advising and so on, all to support our students. And that also requires a culture of care and connecting with our colleagues to ultimately stay focused on our goals and supporting our students where they're at. So I can definitely dive deeper into this, but I just want to pause there, and you may want to ask more questions or kick it off to the next speaker. So I'll just pause there. I want to be fairly brief so we can move this forward, but I'm happy to elaborate on any of this further along.
That's perfect, Rob. And we'll come back to you on the culture of care and holistic collaborative support. We're going to kick it over to Mapi Baez. So Mapi is currently our technology and operations specialist within student affairs. But prior to this new and amazing role, Mapi was an access and wellness counselor for a few years within our access and wellness office. So for those of you who don't know, at UAGC, Access and Wellness is the department that supports our students with disabilities and chronic health conditions. So, Mapi, my question to you is really to tell us a bit about the open access impact you saw in your role in access and wellness and really continue to see, and perhaps speak a bit to what expectations you saw of our students, both visible and invisible.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. I'm honored to be here today with all of you and this fabulous group of individuals that I work with. Drawing from my experience as an access and wellness counselor, as you mentioned, supporting students with disabilities and chronic health conditions, I had the opportunity to have very in-depth conversations with students and their day-to-day in regards to their experience living with disabilities and chronic conditions and how they navigate that through an online education. This opened my eyes to the profound impact of open access on our specific student population and the expectations that come with it, specifically because by design, our open access design, our institution grants opportunities to individuals who may not have otherwise pursued higher education. And those individuals, like Rob mentioned, have diverse backgrounds, including within my population of students in access and wellness, that disability status. So the first kind of themes that come to mind with regards to open access and those expectations are, inclusivity, accessibility, and holistic support services as well. So for students with disabilities, it means, opening new doors to them and the goals that they perhaps had not dreamed of once before. And we've heard of invisible disabilities, those that we cannot immediately identify when looking at an individual. And in a remote setting, we can say that all disabilities can be invisible disabilities until a student, lets us know what's going on. So one thing that, I consider is that this open access opens inclusivity to all of those students. And now as a tech and operations specialist in student affairs, I'm able to identify, at a greater capacity, the students that we serve and all the different diverse backgrounds and how factors of socioeconomic status and so on play upon each other that create impacts that we don't anticipate our students to have. It could be something as small as our students don't know how to complete a PDF, right? We have these expectations of our students potentially being at a level where they can engage in the online environment pretty quickly and not really understanding sometimes, where the readiness level is. So with that inclusivity, we have to consider what may come that we're not expecting our students to already be aware of and pertaining to being ready for an online education and considering how we can support our students so that once they hit that first course, they're more than ready to be successful. And with regards to accessibility, accessibility extends beyond just the physical access to campuses or online platforms. It really encompasses ensuring that our educational materials, our technologies, and our resources are by design in a way that allows our students to engage, right? So to me, open access also goes hand in hand with the universal approach to an education. So I have a lot more to say about that, but like Rob said, I'll pause here. If you have additional questions in regard to some of these items, I'm more than happy to answer, but I do want to make sure I give time for others to introduce themselves very briefly.
Perfect, thank you. And both Rob and Mapi talked about the expectations some of us have of our students on the academic preparedness side and what we expect of a student engaging in a higher education experience, that they come with a level of academic preparedness, which may not be the case in an open access institution. I would argue we also hold some behavioral expectations for our students of how they engage with their peers, with their instructors in the classroom, many of which are invisible expectations that we hold of our students. And so with this, I'm going to turn it over to Kim. Kim Cowan is our Student Rights and Responsibilities Manager here at UAGC. She's been here for over 13 years, and she leads our academic resolution, conduct, and behavior intervention teams. Those teams take care of some of the maybe less fun situations with some of our students. And so she sees a different angle, right, of what we're experiencing across the institution. Those teams are they receive referrals, right, for either conduct or behavior intervention of students who may be behaving in ways that folks are concerned about. And so Kim is the recipient of many of those referrals. And what I'd like to ask of you today, Kim, is to talk about the connection between our student population in an open access environment and some of the referrals that you tend to receive in those departments, and a bit about the feedback that you're giving to the referring parties when often these behaviors aren't meeting a threshold of conduct and behavior intervention, but are presenting an impact to the referring party.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm happy to be here as well. And as any of you can imagine, when you're reviewing a behavioral concern or a potential risk or threat to an institution, they're very challenging and they're very nuanced situations. The referrals we receive have many layers, and they typically stem from communication that is misunderstood. Many times on both sides of the equation. So given that we are a global online institution, we have students that live across the United States. Some might be overseas, even deployed, and they're experiencing very different things than a staff or faculty member, or being at a traditional institution where everybody is kind of the same climate, the same experiences, the same things that are happening in the same area. And as we all have experienced in our own ways, online communication can be difficult, even with our best of intentions, and can be interpreted in a way we never would have imagined the receiver of communication would have taken something. You add into this open access aspect of the institution, and we see different levels that we've already kind of talked about: college readiness, different levels of writing readiness, different higher education experiences depending on their degree program. And what we see in conduct and bit situations, they tend to be not really attempted to be resolved with those caring interventions that we're hoping to have happen. Those caring interventions really being about curiosity, seeking positive resolution, understanding the experience of that specific student and what might be causing some sort of communication or reaction that we may not be aware of or understand. No matter what their level of readiness is, or no matter what's happening in our own lives or the students' lives, it's about communicating in a way that fits everyone involved. So if there is a response from a student that is something that we don't need, want, or expect, that doesn't necessarily make it a conduct situation, but an opportunity to really engage. And the same can be said on the side of the academic resolution process. Students who are challenging their grades or reporting experiences, they show communication and evidence that demonstrate that there's a disconnect between the student and instructor, a misunderstanding that ultimately could impact the student's experience, which could negatively impact their desire, their motivation, and their willingness to succeed in their program. And each request that we receive or referral that we received is so nuanced that it tends to be felt on one side one sort of way, even if, again, the intention is to support or to help somebody succeed. And this highlights some of those invisible expectations of our students. We have this idea in our head that a student should do X, Y, Z in any given situation. And if we're taken aback by the way that they're responding or interacting, that I don't know what to do with that could lead to a negative reaction back, which causes this circle of misunderstandings, which can escalate, can continue to be misinterpreted, and lead to everybody in a situation not feeling like they're successful, supportive, or even making any sort of positive impact moving forward.
A lot to unpack there, Kim. Before we come back to you, Dr. Nicole is a student care advocate on our student care team. That team is the recipient of referrals for students experiencing extreme hardships like homelessness, despair, domestic violence, etc. So Nicole has a unique lens at our student population also. I'm curious, Dr. Nicole, how you imagine open access plays a role here in your niche and your seat at the table, and what we can be doing as an institution to help support our student population from your lens.
Hello, thank you, Rachel. I think for me, it's a little bit different, right? So I'm coming from this lens of advocacy and counseling. And for me, there's a blend between visible and invisible expectations. So even when you say visible, these are really stemming from our expectations that are invisible. So whether we're projecting those or communicating those ideas to our students, they're still really about how we have experienced college, right? How we kind of have adapted to our own values and beliefs and portraying those when we had these experiences. So for example, if I can give one here, if an instructor or any staff or faculty was to say to a student, like, seek out your support system, that is not necessarily a bad thing to say, right? But in our institution, we have to recognize that not all and a majority of our students don't have that support system. And so this is where we kind of have to stop and ask, what are your support systems? Do you have any? How do you get through things? How do you manage, right? So these are kind of all together, these expectations, whether they're visible or invisible. What was that second part of your question?
What we can do as an institution to affect
well, I think that open access or open admissions is the way it's addressed a lot of the time, right? It doesn't really change the narrative of students across the country, right? So what they need, there's an increasing need for forms of mental health assistance and counseling, as well as case management. So that doesn't change that. It really, for me, it changes how we as the institution respond to, right? How we learn about the needs of our students. And these students, like everyone has mentioned, they really come to us in various stages of their life, right? So their education is their goal, but it's also filtered through other various obstacles and their life experience that they're bringing to us. And I think it really surpasses this idea of cultural competence, right? Maybe that's enough to meet our students where they're at, but for me, that's not enough, right? So we really need to begin to understand the concepts and the ideas behind what our students are bringing. And for a big one for me is really about the community cultural wealth. Not only our students' understanding, right? But also our understanding of what that is. It really opens up the paradigms for understanding on both sides and interacting over that. But that's we can go into a whole another thing about that too. So.
I mean, I think what you're speaking to is the cultural capital that our students bring to this institution, right? And the expectations that we have or don't have around those expectations. The baseline piece of capital, right? Like use your networks, advocate for yourself, talk to your professor, these pieces that feel supportive and engaging and may land as, I don't know what that means. I don't know how to do that. And so I think it is incumbent upon all of us, not only to shift our expectations, but to put our efforts into creating a community where it is safe to have those questions, that it is okay to not bring the cultural capital. And it's about creating a community, right? And so my next question for the panelists is really about how do we create that community? How do we work collaboratively to support and engage our students? And Mapi, if you'd want to kick that one off.
Absolutely. So working with students as an access and wellness counselor, there were many times where a student would come kind of after the fact, where they were already experiencing an impact, right? And it was always this like underlying question from some of our faculty and staff as to why didn't the student reach out to us before they were in this position? And I think one of those invisible expectations is that as our non-traditional population of students who are a little bit older should know how to ask for help or should know how to seek out resources. And it's really not the case, right? Like our students may not have had that early on or have those resources, but don't know how to interact with them, don't really know. And it's very challenging for all of us to say like, hey, I just need some help. And I think when it comes to an institution is to provide the opportunity for students to have conversations, right? Although my role is an access and wellness counselor, that doesn't mean that I can't deviate and talk about something different if I'm in a position to give a listening ear to a student. And oftentimes that's what our students need. So when it comes to a community, right, what are our students' needs? And each of our students have very individualized needs, as well as we all do as staff and faculty. But knowing that our students may be experiencing impacts where we can support in various ways and connect with staff and advocate on behalf of a student is super important, right? And that's another thing with advocacy, right? Not all of our students know the right words, or maybe there aren't right words, but just to reach out, right? So I think empowering students to be able to advocate for themselves, while they may not feel comfortably initially, it can definitely build upon them so that through their academic journey and beyond, they're able to seek out that support that they need at a particular point in their life, you know, whether it's a major hardship or just a small speed bump, for them to continue to progress in their academic career.
Thanks. Rob, did you want to speak to this from the faculty perspective?
Yeah, I sure do. Thank you so much. I just want to piggyback on what Mapi and Nicole said, just in terms of empowering the student and giving them a safe space to ask questions. They should feel comfortable. And I think that starts from a faculty perspective, day one, with the tone that we project into the online classrooms, especially. As faculty, we can do that in many different ways. Specifically, for example, I have a welcome video that I've created. It's just a 2-minute welcome video to show them I'm a real person, a human being. And I encourage them, I invite them. I use those words. I invite you to ask me questions as we go through your journey in this course together. And we're going to do it together. It's not just you isolated, it's us. And we're a learning community. And those are the kind of words I use, because I think most people can relate to that as opposed to some complex academic kind of terms. So setting that stage, setting that positive tone, creating that positive learning environment, as I call it, a caring and supportive learning environment, can really go a long way. I found videos, short 2-minute videos can really help a lot throughout the course. It keeps them motivated and engaged, and they realize that they can come to me. I'm here to help support them in their journey, in the course. Other elements of just demonstrating empathy, especially when a student comes to you and has an issue, they have an unfortunate life event that's happened in their lives. And, as just from a perspective of faculty, it's very important to listen, actively listen, read those emails carefully. Sometimes a 2 or 3-minute phone call can resolve a lot of issues as well. I've done that a lot of times instead of a lot of back and forth. Just, hey, do you have a few minutes we can chat? And I've even had this happen to me where a student is maybe upset for whatever reason. Sometimes they take it out on faculty, and they might be harsh in their emails, but I never take that personally. I just assume, hey, that student's having a bad day, or perhaps they don't have a role model. They never really learned how to, professionally communicate, quote unquote, professionally in this type of world. And so, it's important to stay factual, help the students, support them. Again, a 2-minute phone call can go a long way. And, the active listening part is really important, because oftentimes they may want to just vent, or and they have a legitimate concern potentially as well, maybe with the course design or whatever it might be. So active listening is really important. And then that way you can understand their perspective and put yourself in their shoes, if you will. But so by doing those little things along the way, just having that kind of mindset of support, help, lead with care. That's a quote I'm going to borrow from my colleague, Bill Davis. I don't think he's here today, but he often says those phrases, and I love that, lead with care. So credit to Bill Davis for teaching me that as well. Just a couple other things I'll mention real quick. It's important not to judge students either, right? Because again, we've got a diverse set of students. They come from various backgrounds. Many of them don't have role models in their lives. They don't necessarily have that support structure like Nicole was kind of mentioning as well. And so we can be that support function, at least in our roles that, we're given. So I think that sums it up. I want to leave time for the next speaker here, but I've got more to say on this, but I'll pause for right now until the next speaker.
I mean, I think that caring engagement that you're talking about, Rob, is so critical. Students give a lot of themselves in the classroom and can say things that are very important to their lives, to their experiences, and may be a bit unsettling to the reader, something they're not used to, something they weren't expecting. And often, especially those of us in student affairs, we get a lot of, calls for consultation around like, I don't know how to respond. Where should I make a referral? How should I engage? Where should I send the student? To where should I send this concern? And what I hear you saying and what advice, I tend to give is engage, be curious, ask a question. So often those remarks go left unanswered, unresponded to, and then the cycle of like, well, what did I do something wrong? Where is this leaving us, right? And so that very basic, thank you for sharing your story. Would you like to share more? Thank you so much for bringing me into your life. Those very simple statements, I think, can do a lot to engage with experiences that are very different than our own. And I think that really brings us back to culture of care, right? Not only caring for each other and caring for our students, but setting a stage where we are human, right? Like, I love the piece about putting a video on there, because the online environment can feel very, I can kind of stand behind my curtain and not reply to a statement, but to really humanize it. And for me, that's what culture of care is about. Kim, do you want to speak more culture of care from your perspective in this situation?
Absolutely. And this is, one thing that I like to speak positively about. I know I have a lot of heavy things that go on in my area, but we have seen a positive impact through the academic resolution process because of this implementation of culture of care. And students, they may not agree with their grades. They might struggle with a hardship. They might have a concern about something, but we've seen more and more that faculty are willing to attempt to work with our students and provide that flexibility to help them meet and even exceed those learning outcomes in the course. And sometimes what we've seen is that flexibility is just not enough. So they can use the academic resolution process because we don't always understand how a true impact is playing out in a student's life over our 5-6 week quick courses, right? So we've seen positive responses from academic leadership as well through the academic resolution process, where they've offered other opportunities, additional support, flexibility, and time for students, and they are reaching those learning outcomes. So we're proud to say in the academic resolution process that 86% of our students who have engaged are actually in an active or graduate status. So those kind of things are supporting our specific students, and they are receiving that extra support, learning about resources that might be available, and even persisting in our programs. And when our students are navigating non-college life events, we know that there's something that is invisible to us. So we talk about expectations we have that might be invisible no matter how well we've communicated that. Their lives are invisible to us. There's this online barrier. And so our students value that flexibility, and that culture of care from our lens is really about, again, that curiosity theme that I think we all have on this panel, really understanding and engaging with students to learn about their situation and really having that conversation to figure out the solution that best upholds the rigors of the course, but as also sets that student up to meet that ultimate goal of those learning outcomes. Some students, they might need additional time. Some students might need additional attention. Some may need resources outside of the classroom. In many of these situations, as we've talked about, students aren't advocating in a way that we would expect or understand, and they might show anger, they might show frustrations, they might use text speak, they might make demands, they might act like they're on social media, they could use profanity and all of the above. But more often than not, what we're finding is that impacts that students are engaging with and experiencing are causing a lot of these things. Maybe that grade leads a student to not be able to afford living in their house or the food and necessities that they need. Maybe their job is so demanding that they don't have the time to meet that deadline that they wished and tried and worked hard to meet, but are unable to do so. Sometimes students aren't sure how to communicate that information, but we're seeing the positive work of the culture of care, of that flexibility, and how it is important to really understand the individual student, because it is very different. And I think Dr. Nicole might have said this, but somebody else might have as well. Their experience is very different than ours. And so taking a step back, taking a step out of our own experience and being willing to engage in the student's experience can really help us define culture of care that's very focused on that student, but also allows us to engage as a learner with that student as well. And Rob, I know you have something fantastic to add.
And as a former classroom teacher, the hand raised speaks to my heart, Rob. So I will send it over to you.
Thank you so much. And I got amazing colleagues here, obviously. So thanks. I'm learning a lot just from hearing from Nicole, Kim, and Mapi, and Rachel yourself as well. I just want to piggyback on one thing that has already been discussed, but just dive a little bit deeper. And that's the concept of basically asking some open-ended questions and active listening and trying to really get a good understanding of the situation at hand with the student. And what I want to propose, or this is something I've used that works really well, so I just want to share it with everyone, is the concept of appreciative inquiry. Okay, we're basically asking these questions in order to gain that deeper insight as to what that student is experiencing in their lives, not to get personal with the student and their personal issues, but really just to assess how you as a faculty member, me as a faculty member, can help that student overcome an obstacle that they're facing. And I'll just share a really quick story. I'll try to be really brief here. This happened about a year ago with a student. And the student unfortunately had a tragic event happen in their lives. Their father passed away, and that's some other things going on as well on top of that. And the student was ready. She sent me an email. She said, I gotta quit. I can't take this anymore. Too much stress and all that. And I sent her an email back and said, listen, is it possible we can just chat for a few minutes? I would like to, just help and support if I can. And she said, yeah, sure. So we chatted, the next day. Long story short, I used the principles that I just talked about, appreciative inquiry. I recognized and appreciated, the fact that she's got these events that happen in her life. I didn't get too personal on any of that stuff, just acknowledge basically. And then I asked some open-ended questions, and we moved the conversation along. And ultimately, what I got to the point on was I asked the student for permission to provide perspective, my own perspective, after I listened to her and kind of assessed what the situation was. I asked her for permission because I don't want to intrude. And showing that respect, showing that empathy can go a long way, right? And so what I told her is, before you decide for sure to quit the program or pause for now, just reflect back on why you got started in the first place. Why did you start your degree? And take a little time to reflect on that. And also maybe consider, the passing of your father. What would he have wanted for you in terms of, your growth, your personal and professional growth and career and academics and so on? And she had never heard that before from anybody. I could tell right away based on the conversation. In other words, she didn't really have a role model or support function, like Nicole had mentioned, in her life. I was that person basically, and I was honored to be that person as a faculty member in whatever role I could provide. So the next day, she called me back and she said, Dr. Shah, thank you so much for the conversation. It really helped sort things out. And I reflected on everything you said. And I've decided to continue on my program because this is what my father wanted for me. And I want this for my kids as well, to be a role model for her own kids. And that was just so heartwarming for me and touching. And that's when I felt like, okay, I made a real difference in these students' lives and hopefully future generations as well. So I just want to share that story and how these are things that really do impact student lives and their families. And this is one of the reasons why I got into teaching in the first place, because I want to serve the community. And there's very few professions that we can say this to, medical providers, healthcare providers, first responders, and teachers. We can truly impact the lives of that student and future generations. So just want to share that with everybody.
I love that example, Rob. I think when we talk about culture of care as the answer to open access, which I think you could argue is part of it, but the what, the why, the how, and that example I think is so perfect about what it does look like. I'll kick it to you, Nicole, and for the future, y'all don't have to raise your hands. You can just keep talking.
No, I just want to say thank you, Rob, for acknowledging the student in that way. It's really just that humanistic approach, right? But even more so, really coming from this asset-based framework, right? So I think I'd mentioned it, it's a different point. We tend to look at a lot of marginalized groups, right? Those of color, lower SES, it's just like this deficit view that's just kind of held throughout the literature. And coming from an asset-based framework is really important to recognize their own characteristics, their own knowledge. What do they have in their values, practices, all of that. And it really does make a difference when I'm asking those questions of students who are being referred. They sometimes don't know how to answer because no one's ever really given them that space to do that, right? It's just always an expectation without any type of conversation or dialogue about who they are. So thank you for that. And then just, that's what I was just going to say.
I'm going to jump in. Rob, that was an incredible thing that you did, and wonderful story. And I know that's not one, that's probably one of many. Same thing that you do, Nicole. And so, you know, not to quote the UAGC's culture of care, but just to kind of slip it in, right? One of the components of culture of care is to foster community grounded in trust and belonging. And those actions are building trust with our students, and they're building belonging above all. And really, to meet the diverse needs of our student population, we need to offer comprehensive range of holistic support services. And that's, you know, what we're talking about here, and really kind of what we have dove into in student affairs and across the university in terms of like, what are the needs of our students, and recognizing what they need, and knowing that those are influenced by various factors, right? Not just academic ones, as we've been talking. And some of the services that we provide, they go beyond the traditional academic advising, and they include, you know, as Nicole's mentioned, the mental health support, the wellness programs, and even if it's not a wellness program, it's what Rob's doing to his students, reaching out, asking those appreciative inquiries. Career counseling, we have an amazing career services team, financial and you know, community resources, and as well as engagement through mentorship, right? What is holistic support? How can we continue to dive into that? And again, it just involves identifying potential challenges that our students may experience within their academic career, and be able to address those kind of proactively rather than reactively. And we've implemented a lot of great systems at the university, like warning systems, mentorship programs, as I mentioned, and proactive outreach to our students. I know in Access and Wellness, we are engaging more with our students proactively, right? Rather than waiting for them to reach out to us when they're experiencing impacts. We're reaching out to check in on them. Hey, how's it going? Remembering small details. How's your dog Henry doing, right? That stuff creates trust, it creates belongings. And I know that my colleagues all embrace those elements and move forward with that kind of mindset when connecting with our students. And also, I mentioned, you know, advocacy, and we've all mentioned advocacy and empowering students. You know, how can we teach our students to communicate their own needs, use their agency to express themselves, to navigate the institutional systems that will help them better navigate the outside systems, and also to advocate for policy changes within our university that benefit not only them, but all of our student body. And I know that I've seen that internally when student situations arise and we, you know, check ourselves. I don't know that this policy is really working out or with this intention, and we've made changes internally. And I think that's reflective of those invisible and visible expectations that we start to understand and to address as an institution holistically to support our student population.
Rachel, if you don't mind, I just wanted to add, I understand that not everyone feels confident and comfortable having those conversations that maybe, Rob, you have shared. They're not easy. They can make you feel uncomfortable. They can, what will happen in the conversation? Am I going to overstep my bounds? You know, all of those things. And I think it's important when we're talking about belonging in community for students, there's also belonging in community for faculty and staff as well. There's also culture of care for faculty and staff as well. And I think that it's important when you don't know a resource or you're not sure how to engage with a student to reach out to your community and to staff and faculty in your community to seek out suggestions, consultation, support. How do I go about this? But also feeling empowered and confident to say, when you're in a conversation, when you're asked a question you don't know, I don't know, but I'm sure as heck gonna find out for you. So I think it's okay not to have all of the answers when you're engaging with students, especially when they're experiencing something that you are not comfortable with, have never experienced. But it does show a level of care when you attempt to connect, to understand, and then say, you know what, I'm going to find out this, or I'm going to get somebody to contact you who is better suited. I've said that a lot in my conversations. I'm not the expert in that area. I don't want to misspeak to it, but I'm going to find somebody who can and who can provide that support that you're seeking. But if I do that initial engagement, I can get that support to them rather than leaving them in a situation where they have no idea what's available. I don't have any idea to help, and we just kind of sit in our sides. So I want people to feel empowered to engage in those conversations, just to understand and information gather, and then let the other people be able to support as the experts.
Well, and let's consider for a minute too, I'm a working professional at this institution who's been here for 6 years, and I don't have the answers to all their questions. Certainly the student doesn't either, right? But I have the cultural capital and the relationships at this institution to find the answers and to get them to the right places. And so that's the piece about the holistic part, right? Is that there's a few different ways to do holistic support. One, I can be an expert in a whole lot of things, which I try to do, but there will still be limitations. But the other piece is bringing in my village, right? And I know Mapi has various examples too, right, of bringing this village together to create that wraparound support to bring to our students. I'm reading Juanita's chat at the same time as I'm trying to talk. But that's what I think this is part of, right? How do we bring our abilities and our knowledge and capital to a situation where our students may be lacking and looking to us with those relationships we're bridging with those conversations that we're having.
Can I say something?
Please.
So, I know with open admissions too, it's really had this long history, a lot in favor of, right, and a lot of harsh criticism of it as well. But one part that really stands out to me, and that is, and it really does have a continuous dialogue along with it, is really for universities to be really reflective. So their staff, faculty, leadership to be very reflective of their student population. And so what that looks like here, I'm not sure, but I think increasing that or being a part of moving that forward as just a movement overall is very important to these students as well.
Thank you for that, Nicole. Any other comments before I move on?
Just want to share something that Nicole just talked about. One of the ways we do that actually in faculty is we do a program review every few years. We look at our program. Right now I'm actually doing one for the MS Finance program. And that's really helping us dive deeper into our student population, the demographics. And it's all an opportunity to continuously improve what we do and deliver and our promises to our students. So that's just another way of how faculty can engage in the overall process of, creating an open access environment that's supportive to diverse student populations. So certain things, just one specific example would be DEI, including DEI, information and, voice from different speakers, articles from diverse speakers into our curriculum. That's just another way we can demonstrate that, we're an inclusive, welcoming organization here for our students.
So I hope folks start to put some questions in the chat if you have any. Really, under the purpose of this panel was to really highlight the expectations that we bring to our open access students without really even acknowledging it, perhaps, right? And shed light on that, put a spotlight on that. Be able to acknowledge what expectations you might be carrying for your students that maybe have to do with your experience when you went to school, right? And I heard Kim say it today, and many of us have said before, that our students today was not us, right? That's not the student that I was. And we still bring those expectations. We bring them around what their family life is like, what capital they bring, what their financial situation might be. And it's just really such a different place. And so this need to really abandon the expectation we had of ourselves as students and put forth who our students are today. So hopefully we were able to at least bring those to the surface, that folks can really start considering what invisible expectations they're carrying for their students and how maybe they're making decisions and feedback based on those expectations, and being curious and asking questions. So in the interest of time, and while I hopefully wait for some questions from our attendees, I'm hoping that folks can speak to really what's one piece of advice or the biggest thing you want folks to leave with today from your seat around how we can engage and support this very unique population of students that we have, with the rich opportunity to really change the trajectory of lives and families and lives to come. So there's so much we can be doing, and I want to spotlight all of you in what's one thing you want folks to leave with from your perspective.
I'm going to be a broken record, so I'll go first, but be curious, not judgmental. It's the biggest takeaway the biggest success I've had with any student in the most challenging conversations that I've had to have is being curious about their experience and not judging them for lack of understanding or whatever reason. It's being curious.
And on a practical note, if I could just add ways to do that are, can you tell me more? Share more on that. Let's talk more about that, right? Like those are ways we can be curious without being judgmental. Mapi, I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, I mean, I've been talking about diverse backgrounds, and we have been, right, to embrace that richness that comes from students' diverse backgrounds, their experience, and the level of readiness, and to consider it an opportunity for mutual growth and learning. And I apologize for the dog in the back. And also, and I think this is an important one that we consider with open access, open enrollment education. Compassion with our students does not equate to a reduction in the rigor of our education. Academic standards can be met with holistic support services and resources. So consider what that means to the individuals that we support, and how we can uplift their strengths, and also acknowledge the challenges of each of our students and providing the necessary support to help them excel. I think that by approaching the work with empathy and understanding, we can create an environment where every student can thrive.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what Mapi said, because the word that came to my mind was the word empathy, and Mapi just used that word, and I think that can go a long way. Just kind of showing empathy, a sense of appreciative inquiry, using those techniques that we talked about in this session here today, can really demonstrate, and that you're creating that caring and supportive learning environment for that student to thrive in. As Mapi said, I love that word, and recognizing the student for all that they bring to the table and empowering them in that way. So things like providing positive feedback, also with some constructive criticism, where they can improve their work. And from a faculty perspective, these things are really important. Showing strong instructor presence in the classroom, answering emails in a timely manner and responding. Sometimes just a phone call can go a long way as opposed to back and forth emails. So all these things collectively can support the student. And also, I'll just mention, I don't think we've really talked about this much in today's session yet, is the opportunity to collaborate and calibrate with internal stakeholders, meaning faculty, other departments. I know I've reached out, for example, to the amazing work that the career services folks do, alumni services folks do. And by learning that on my own, just reaching out to them, kind of shadowing them, and talking to some folks there, I gained a lot of insight, and I was impressed by the amount of resources we have for students. And then I can bring that back to the classroom to support students that, hey, we've got these great resources with other people, other experts within the university. So that's another way to provide additional value for our students, to really raise them up and build their confidence level, because oftentimes they don't have the confidence in their own abilities. So I use even like images in my announcement, little things, little quotes that are inspirational in nature. And I can't tell you how many times students have come back to me and say that really made a difference in their lives, or their day even, or brightened their day, or it could be a little outreach email or messaging. So all these things collectively can really add a lot of value to our students. I'll leave it at that.
And Rob, you led with empathy, you led your comment with empathy, but leading with empathy. And this was pointed out in a meeting I was in the other day, that sympathy is not empathy, right? Feeling sorry for somebody, feeling sad for them is not empathy. Empathy is being able to see it from their perspective, to be able to see the impact. My fourth grader is currently learning about empathy. They watch this little video that sings a song about walking in other people's shoes that I'm going to save all of you from singing myself, though it's in my head. But I think as a society, we're doing a better job from kiddos, right? Talking about, what does empathy look like? How do we step into another person's perspective and use that lens with which to guide us, versus, oh, that sounds really hard, or, oh, that must be sad. And so I really appreciate you pointing that out. Additionally, Sherry, I see that you put in the chat not to take things personally. And that was something you shared with too, Robert, that folks can get upset and we can be the recipients of their sadness, upset, etc. And that 9 times out of 10, it's probably not about us. And it's really about the other person. And again, back to that empathy, like, what's really going on here, right? And I'm going to take myself out of this and try and see it from their perspective. Nicole.
For me, it's really moving away from the deficit view develop your critical consciousness, acknowledge your bias, implement a strength-based, asset-based model in whatever it is you're doing. Identify, acknowledge, and communicate those strengths to your students and what they bring, and then sit back and watch the growth. That's all I got.
Well, I think we shared so much here today. Part of the purpose of our panel is to talk about holistic support, right? And bringing folks together. And I think we do have a tendency to do really amazing things in our own spaces. And then maybe not highlight them or bring them to other places or connect the dots for each other, for our students. And the more we can be doing around that topic and around elevating each other and supporting each other, I think that that will help make us a better institution, will help bring this culture of care as truly the answer to open access, and really moving the needle and seeing a subset of students who may never have graduated college graduate and go on to do amazing things in this world, and can credit this particular institution or any open access institution for providing that opportunity that may not have otherwise been there. So I personally have no issue with ending a little early today and giving folks time back to attend next sessions and regroup. I'm just giving my host the opportunity to close out if he wishes to. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate it. Thank you to the whole team. I really enjoyed this presentation today. I'm sure you did too. All of the perspectives, strategies, tips, tools, resources that we can all pull on, especially the stories. I know that they'll resonate with me throughout the remainder of my work day and as I carry out throughout the remaining work week. I encourage you all to share your own stories. You've had your own individual experiences. Share the solutions, the stories, the strategies that worked, because you have no idea the impact of how that might support someone else in their situation, what they might be experiencing. Thank you to the entire panel, Rachel Orlansky for being an amazing panel host, Dr. Rob Shah, Dr. Nicole Villarreal, Kim Cowan, and Mapi Baez, our speakers today. Thank you for sharing your time and your expertise with us. Lastly, we want to thank the audience for your participation in today's session. I'm posting a link in the chat to share that prior to heading to your next session. If you have the time, please complete this survey. Nominate your favorite TLC presentation for conference awards and share your feedback on the conference experience today. I'd like to wish everybody a happy TLC Wednesday and enjoy the remainder of your sessions.